Welcome to the Kings of Chaos podcast, starring Al Gord and Adam Dolgan. Al?
Adam, thanks. What the hell are we doing here today?
We're starting a podcast.
Okay. Podcast about,
People, helping people,
okay,
talking to people.
personal development.
Personal development is a good one, yeah.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness is good.
Okay.
Are we going to be playing this straight? Or are we going to have fun with it?
I can't be serious the whole time, so we got to have fun with this.
Yeah, I don't want to be Mr. Rogers if I don't have to be.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Because, yeah, you and that sweaters and everything.
Yeah, or the shoes.
I know.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
not do that.
Okay.
So, what is our podcast about?
Oh, wow. Our podcast is about a journey, a self-deprecating journey into personal growth, self-awareness,
Self-development,
yeah, life lessons.
life lessons. That
Yeah.
sounds nice.
Um,
What do we know? Are we experts?
No, hell no.
No.
Hell no. So,
We just wanted to put that disclaimer out there.
yeah, neither one of us is a therapist, neither one of us is a psychologist. So this is more from our own experience, our own growth, our own learnings, talking to other people.
I think we can help a lot of people. We've both been through a lot of shit.
We've been through a lot, and I think we've both grown because of that. And I think it's helped us both become better versions of ourselves with all that.
Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so a little bit about me in terms of my journey. My background's in education, former principal in the school system. Left that 5 years ago.
How did that feel?
Invigorating, freeing.
Like you were fighting the man?
Yeah, fighting the system. Everyone always asks, was it about the students? I was like, no, kids are amazing. It's the messed up people out there are the adults. And it felt really great to leave. And from there, I left not knowing what I was going to do. So you want to talk about some chaos and some uncertainty and dealing with discomfort. No plan in mind. Took an unpaid year off. Did a few things. I wanted to really focus on my art career. As you know, I paint, so I wanted to focus on the art career. Wanted
And
to
tell
build that
everyone
brand.
what you paint.
I hate talking about it. I like the humble side, but
What's the most interesting thing you painted?
the most interesting thing was for a recent erotic art show that I did. So that was wild. But typically, I paint rock stars and other, as I like I said, other rebels and rogues and
You
badasses.
go from being an elementary school principal to erotic art. That's kind of a big jump.
It's a slight jump. Yeah. Definitely a bit of a difference.
You're a little different yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And now again, just to clarify, I'm not a therapist, but I do work for a clinic where I'm a coach working in the area of mental wellness, and now a podcaster as well.
All right. So the
yeah.
difference between your life 5 years ago and now, more enjoyable?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? What I realized with everything is the things you can't replace. For me, at least, the most important things: health, happiness, freedom, choice, and just more of that quality time with family and friends as well.
What do you find if you've made these changes? Like, what are you still striving for that you haven't achieved yet?
There's no one singular achievement I'm looking for right now. It's more just, again, that journey. Continue to learn more, continue to grow, continue to experience new things. For a long period of time, I was in that routine, and now it's okay. There's so much out there. There's so much to be experienced. Like, how can I take advantage? How can I live life to the fullest? How can I hopefully impact others in a positive way? How can I make a difference? And where can things go with that?
Do you miss telling other adults what to do?
Yeah, no. I enjoy helping other adults. I enjoy hopefully making a difference and having a positive impact. But in terms of having to kind of be on top of things all the time and having to, kind of keep people focused with everything, not missing that at all.
What's your biggest goal for the podcast?
Hopefully just to be able to connect with, the audience. if people out there can take something away, if they can, something resonates with them, if there's questions that they have where, they want to interact with us and, we can do a podcast on those topics. Anything that can hopefully, as I say, connect with the audience and hopefully make a difference, or at least let someone out there know that, hey, their situation is maybe not unique. They don't feel so isolated with that. Connection for me is everything.
Yeah,
That's my key.
we're more the same than we are different.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, what about you though? I mean, you got a really interesting story yourself, and it's like enough about me. So, what about you? What's your story?
My life's been very interesting. Very interesting. Um, how I came to this, as a kid, had a very interesting upbringing. Said the word interesting about 100 times. We won't touch that paper anymore. Our producer's going to yell at us. I, my parents were divorced when I was two and a half. My mother was divorced again when I was 12.
Wow.
Um, she was married again when I was in my early 20s and then moved away. My last year of high school, I got to stay in the house by myself with my older brother. I had a bit of an autonomous childhood where we got to raise ourselves. It was nice.
So, is that somewhere almost like a Home Alone situation meets a risky business?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Okay.
There
Okay.
there was one time where, I did throw a party and we had this thing called a graduate shot glass, which was 5 shots in one when I think it was 17,
Okay.
which we made the mistake of giving one of my friends during a snowstorm. So we didn't see the aftermath of that until the snow thawed out, which was pretty gross.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of that did go on, but more so, yeah, a little bit of risky business, but more, it started when I was 12. We moved away from an area that I'd grown up in my early lifetime. And I had to figure out how to get home on my own. A lot of things that kids don't do today.
Right.
But also figuring out, what happens when you forget your key or lose it in the snow on your way home and you're the first kid home by yourself.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. So there's a lot of things that I probably went through that a lot of my friends didn't go through, or even my brothers who were older and they had access to a car and things like that.
Okay.
So for me, I find that, kind of makes it more interesting. I have great stories of, being forgotten at school by my mother and then by my brothers, getting, lifts home from teachers that smelled really bad, especially at the end of the day. Those schools were hot. Uh, and it's stories like that that make you who you are. Because my parents were divorced and we didn't live with my dad as well. He was kind of an interesting character growing up. He wasn't the best dad, and then we had a stepfather who wasn't the best dad, and then I had a stepmother who wasn't the best stepmother. My mother's phenomenal. I will say that again. I love you, Mom. Uh, we had an interesting upbringing. So as you get older and you start to see how that affects you, it affects you in good and bad ways.
And that was my question for you. So, based on that whole upbringing,
Mhm.
right? How, in what ways has that led to your journey? How has this led to maybe some, even a snip in terms of your
It
self-awareness or your personal growth?
it led me to some bad choices.
Yeah.
Sometimes in even what I was choosing in school, I wasn't necessarily choosing the things that I should have been taking. Although I
Okay.
did take psychology, which, is kind of why we're here now.
Yeah.
So I didn't use it for a long time, but going back, I probably should have, done more of that or even become a psychologist, possibly. There are a lot of different decisions I would have made. As my mother once said when we were kids, she's like, don't let a 18-year-old make decisions for a 40-year-old.
Yeah.
And when you don't have the guidance you think that you needed at that age, you will make those decisions. Now, even in making those bad decisions, did everything turn out all right? Yeah. Could it have been different? Yes. You don't lament that though. You learn from those lessons, and then you look at, as you get older, okay, what made you strong, especially in adverse situations that you'll go through later in life. And because I've had those different experiences than other people have had, I feel that, I have a lot to bring to the table to help teach other people, especially the younger people.
Yeah.
Even in a different generation, it's a very different generation than ours growing
Oh,
up.
extremely different.
And I just thought, if we can help at least even one person by bringing our experience to a podcast and try to make it fun, able to make fun of ourselves, even with all the weird stuff that's happened, I thought, that's rewarding enough just to help one person. Do I think we're only going to help one person? No, I think we're going to help millions. However, you got to start somewhere. So, that's part of my story. And it never stops. You're always learning new things. And, can I say that for a long time, you have to reparent yourself, right? So you have to go back and figure out, okay, what age did I get stuck at?
And I love that term,
Mm,
reparenting. And you talk about your mother.
mm,
I know with me, my parents, amazing, like
mm.
amazing childhood. Um, Raised myself, my two sisters.
But they can
They
only
actually
prepare you for so much. Yeah.
absolutely. And what I tell people even now, and again, you look at parenting today, and you have a couple of kids.
Mhm.
I don't have any children, but having worked with children, it's such a different time right now. And parents, despite their best efforts, they can do everything with the best intentions. The reality is,
Yeah.
there's still going to be something along the way that's going to impact the children, whether it's a decision a parent made or something else during that childhood. It might not be the parent directly, it could be it could be another adult that impacts people, and that's what plays into things now.
It's funny that you're saying that because one of my favorite quotes about parenting is all parents will fuck up their kids 100% of the time. And I learned that when I was a dad blogger, which is another reason why I wanted to do this because I had a successful dad blog that
And,
got up
and,
to
and I think,
65,000 fans,
yeah, and I
right?
think you got to talk a little bit about that too, because even though, again, you're not a therapist, you're not a
Mm,
psychologist, but I know from that really successful blog,
mm,
again, you really impacted people, you connected with people,
yeah.
and you're writing that blog as, when I say a single dad, in
Mhm.
terms of,
Well, I was
you know,
married at the time,
oh,
but
were you
yeah,
married at the
yeah, I
time?
was
Okay,
married at the time.
okay,
Yes.
okay. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. Okay,
Uh, no, it was a great experience. I was dared to do it. Someone thought there's like, you're a good writer. Why don't you try to make money online in advertising? And my ex-wife messed that up on the first day because I think she overclicked
okay.
Google ads and they blocked me for the next 20 years. So I had to find other ways to make money, so I ended up blogging for other people and things like that behind the scenes in companies. But the most rewarding part of having, and it started as a dad blog, but I turned it into a parenting blog because I
Yeah,
realized, and I think online this is true of most, podcasts or whatever. I find there's more women online,
okay.
and if you can reach a female audience will definitely bring a male audience, although the males will find you
Yep.
too. But I definitely had a female audience, about 80,000 people, and I was reaching everywhere to Australia. I could even tell you like the cities that I was most popular in. Uh, couple in Texas, right? Dallas was one, Austin was another, Melbourne, Australia.
Really?
Oh, I went 24/7 with the
That's
blog.
awesome. That's awesome.
So, but the most fun was not the blogging or anything like that. It was talking to all the people, in the groups, and I was using Facebook mostly.
Okay.
So what was happening is, it's almost like giving a presentation. It's immediate as opposed to just writing something and
Yeah.
having to wait. That immediate feedback from people letting you know that you were helping people or not. And what was funny is I had two different things going. I had a blog where, school teachers would write me and say, your educational articles that you've posted are really helping the kids. And I just had a kid write this and it was really helpful to them. I never got that from adults.
Right.
What I would get from adults is, can we get more popcorn because your conversations on circumcision or breastfeeding in public are really insightful, but in a different kind of insightful. And it became an interesting place to be, but the most fun for me was having someone come at me who had a different viewpoint than I did
Yeah.
and being able to help them see it from my point of view, even if they didn't agree, which I think is a great thing if you're able to do that. And I'd like to do that here too.
So let me ask you this, based on your experience as a blogger,
Mhm,
what did you learn from that that you can take away that you either want to apply to the podcast
mhm.
or that you want to do differently?
That's a loaded
I
question.
know. I wasn't going to let you off that easy.
I want to be able to take away from that and say there are a bunch of things I learned. One was how to grow a group of people that even though they're like-minded, they are so vastly different in other ways where everyone was actually teaching each other and they were actually teaching me too.
Yeah.
Right. I was a parenting blogger, but I'd only been blogging, like had kids for like 2 years at that point.
Okay.
So it was fake it till you make it. But all these other parents were like helping me cultivate this group and create this huge group of people to help each other. So that was one thing is, being able to cultivate a group of people that we're actually helping each other,
Nice,
right? So
nice.
if you can create that and in, incite other people, use that word again, in a way that makes them want to help other people, but however, if someone jumps into the group and is like, nah, I don't want to do that, right? But they try to work with them at the same time. So that's one thing. The other thing that I really found that I learned the most from doing that is if you come at it in a way where you are neutral
Yep.
and you are not telling people what to do, you can tell them your point of view, but you're not telling people what to do. Most people will be accepting of it. The interesting thing about it is you will always have groups, and I call it 3% of the population. And this is anywhere, this
Oh,
could be on the street,
I
this
was
could
gonna
be
say it's the
online.
97.3. I used to call it the 98.2 or the
Yeah. Oh,
99.1
I didn't even
rule.
know that was a thing. I thought I
Yeah,
made that up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We used to talk about that all the
Yeah.
time.
But
Yeah.
there's 3% of people that just are out to ruin everyone else's day. And I even found with that um, that doesn't matter because those people make things interesting too, and they change the conversation and they help it. And without them, you wouldn't be looking at topics in the same way. So we welcome that. I think you and I both welcome people
Absolutely.
coming at us and say, I totally disagree with what you say. Great.
Yeah.
I want to hear it. So,
And there were a few things you touched upon. You talked about kind of that interaction with everyone. To me, it almost in the sense of like fostering a sense of community,
hmm,
right? And I think that's what it's about. I think we want to create that sense of community with what we're doing here.
yeah.
Um,
I don't want to repeat certain things that I did on that site because I became the Jerry Springer of dad bloggers.
okay, yeah,
So it's almost like I was a character. Here, I think that you and I both want to be authentic and
absolutely.
tell it from our points of view, but try to keep it fun at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's important that we can do that because if we're authentic, then other people can be authentic with us.
And I think part of that key with us being authentic, and we've talked about this, is the idea of vulnerability.
Hmm.
And I think what hopefully is maybe a little bit different or unique, and we've talked about this as well, and you talked about the female audience earlier,
Hmm.
is that we're not here to come off with the typical, or at least we don't think what's the typical male approach, right? It's, yeah, okay, it's about being raw, being authentic, taking ownership for certain things we've done as
Yeah.
well, maybe trying to change some of that perspective and even share some perspectives, maybe a different take on things from a masculine point of view or a male point of view.
Yeah, and I don't think we're typical males. I
No,
think at
no.
this point in our lives, we've seen enough in certain things where we don't necessarily think, well, there's a lot of atypical males, but at the same time, there are groups of males
um,
that will probably totally disagree with what we're saying.
Absolutely.
And I hope they come up one day and they tell us that they disagree because I'd love to have that conversation. But I do think that, yeah, you and I see things a little bit differently, which I think is open to a male and female audience.
Absolutely. And again, we're not here, we're not trying to influence, we're not trying to sway. We
Mhm.
are presenting our perspective,
Mhm.
our experiences, our points of view, and hopefully it connects with people where it's like, yeah, that that makes sense, or it's that aha moment where it's like I never thought of it that way. We're not asking people to convert to our beliefs with everything. That's not the intent whatsoever. It's really about just the conversations we normally have. If we're at a bar on a patio having a beer, it's the same type of conversations. That's what we want to do is just kind of take it to the next
The
level.
conversations that we start having, and then the waitresses all come over and they start listening to us and go, "What are you talking about?"
Exactly. Then we get them involved and we traumatize the waitresses when they don't have answers on the spot.
Yeah, they have a really hard time answering our questions. It's true.
So I was gonna say, I guess leading into this,
Mhm.
we haven't even talked about the title.
Why we named it what we
Yeah.
named
So I
it?
think
Yeah.
that's important. So I mean, you came up with the name, the Kings of Chaos, Chaos with a K.
Hmm.
You want to
Well,
talk a
why
little bit
did I
about
do
that?
that?
Yeah, talk to us about that.
I came up with the name Kings of Chaos, which I was actually going to use as a book title.
Okay.
It came up years ago in a therapy session. I've been to different therapists over the years and usually bailed after 6 months. But now that I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser, I take it a little more seriously now.
Yeah.
So I've even brought it up with my current therapist, who I love, by the way. Uh, the whole idea behind Kings of Chaos is there was one session I was having where she said, I just realized that, whatever you have this, there's a bunch of things that, you could claim that I had from the way I grew up. But one of them was, she goes, "You're addicted to chaos." And I looked at her, I said, "Is that a good or a bad thing?" She says, "It depends the way you look at it." And for me, I look at it in certain ways. In some ways, it's a great superpower
Yep.
because I get a lot of things done when I want to because I can work in chaos. During COVID, I was sitting in the house. I had two kids, a girlfriend living with me, just got a puppy. The kids are at, doing school, and I was happy to have them in the same room and I could work while they were both in the same room. She hid in the back in the garage, created an office in the garage. She's like, I can't handle this. And I'm sitting with a puppy and two kids and doing my own work and I'm, on Zooms and things like that. But to me, that's comfortable. Most people, they might be able to handle one or two things at the same time. For me, it's like, give me 10. Or I can do work in such a way where I can compartmentalize it. And it's only because of the way I grew up. I grew up also in a big family. I had three older brothers, and at one point I had two stepsisters,
Right.
and then all their friends were at the house. To me, I love that chaos. Whereas a lot of other people's like, they need to escape it. And the truth be told, I'm probably an introvert more than an extrovert. I probably like right on the line of both. So it's weird that I get energy from that. Even though I should be the kind of person that my energy would come from, spending time by myself, which I can do too. I'm a bit of an artist myself. So I just found it interesting when she brought that up to me, and then I had to start looking it up. And I'm like, that's a great title for anything where you kind of have to, look at the world that we live in, which is also a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
And, how can you bring your perspectives to that and kind of draw people in? It's just a great name that just kind of encompasses what we do because, especially right now, the world is very chaotic.
I'm going to take it one further. The
Yeah.
world is fucked. Like, let's be
The
honest.
world is
Okay, the world
totally,
is
the world
totally
is
fucked.
totally fucked.
But here's the thing: people seem to equate chaos or chaoticness
Mhm.
naturally with from a negative perspective,
Mhm.
right? And as you talked about, it depends on the situation, depends on the experience, depends on the approach you take, and all those things. When I take a look and I read, sometimes you'll see things where chaos is synonymous with drama.
Mhm.
I see them as separate entities,
Yeah.
and I'd be curious your take. To me, drama is almost it's someone who thrives on creating issues. They thrive on creating situations that are difficult,
Negative attention.
negative attention
Negative attention.
constantly,
Yeah.
right? Whereas chaos is the reality is we all have things, whether it's the things going through our head that we're sitting there and
Mhm.
kind of ruminating on, whether it's shit going on at work that we're trying to work through,
Mhm.
whether it's things with family. But I take a look at things too, and it's okay. How do we sit in some of that discomfort? Because that's one of the things in
Mhm.
today's society, everything's about escapism, right? So it's as soon as there's chaos, how do I deal with it?
Well, it's interesting.
Drink. I'm gonna
Yeah.
smoke up. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that.
It's interesting that you bring up the term comfort
Yeah,
because a lot of people would find and comfort's something that most people seek out, which I think is an issue.
yeah,
Because comfort, you're just dying, right? You want to be in a nice, safe place where you're not growing. And if you think that you're finding comfort in that, you're not finding any comfort in that at all because you're
no,
definitely not growing and you're going to bring more problems to yourself. Whereas I find the people that function well in chaos, and my favorite quote is always about General George Patton from World War II. And I always liked that quote because I felt that way myself. The quote about him was wartime hero, peacetime fuck up, right? So in wartime, you needed that guy
absolutely.
because he's the guy who can go out there and function in all that blood and guts and all that stuff that's happening to people and still be able to organize all that and win. Whereas other people, don't want to go anywhere near that. Or other people were telling him what to do, and he's like, "No, you're wrong, because I'm in the front line. I know what's actually going on, and I'm going to go do it. You're just going to sit here and tell other people to do it."
Yeah,
Um, but it's the peacetime part, right? Because you have that energy in you. What happens to you when, and this is where, it's superpower on that side.
yeah,
Where is it a weakness? It's when you can't use that energy. What do you do? And then it's negative things. So if you look at me as a student, you were a principal, what kind of kid was I? I was the kid who did well in school. And the teachers, for the most part, liked me, but I pretty much got sent to the office at least once a day. I liked having the principal's face turn purple. I didn't like fighting with kids my own age. I usually got in fights with kids older than I was, but whatever was going on in my house that made me want to be that person, if I wasn't engaged, these are the kind of things that would happen, right? So that's negative attention too, as we were saying. So I find that part of it really interesting. So is that a weakness though? Or it's just, if you find a way to channel that, something creative or something like,
Yeah.
then that person could be more productive.
And even going off topic a little bit, but going back to,
Yeah.
you as a child, when you take a look at those younger years,
Mm.
right? I mean, those are always students who just I thought the world of.
Mm.
And I know people like, come on, I'm like, children innately want to please,
Yeah.
right? They want to make adults proud. They want to please.
Mm.
And so what happens with all that is when you have that type of behavior that you're seeing, it's a cry for something else, right? It's a way of saying, hey, I need this, I need that.
It's definitely a cry for help and whatever it is, having three older brothers,
Yeah.
right? My brother and I used to box in the basement so he could punch me in the face with winter gloves. That's how I said, let's box, right? It basically means I just want to punch you in the face. Never drew blood with thick winter gloves. But it's just an interesting thing because yeah, you send that kid to school with that kind of energy. And my thing is, I was also twice the size of any other kid. I was going to get in trouble anyways.
Yeah.
So when you add that to it, if a kid just bumped into me while we were playing a sport, I was getting in trouble anyways. So if you're going to get me into trouble, I didn't do anything. What's a kid going to do?
Oh, absolutely. They might as well, if you're going to get in trouble, you
They
might as well find something to get in trouble for. If you're going to be consequence, you might as well actually do something.
and it's attention. So
Absolutely.
you start seeking that out. And I wouldn't say I was necessarily a bad kid. I still think of myself as a sensitive person. I fight for the underdog. But at the same time, in those situations, I liked going after the authority figures. I'm the only one in my family who got suspended in grade 5 for telling the vice principal to go fuck himself. No one else in my family would have dared to do it,
Right.
but I was just that kind of kid. Uh, I hide it well as an adult. It still comes out here or there,
Absolutely.
but that's in you. So it's that kind of chaos, and I almost welcome it. I kind of stopped too because once I started learning about prison, I really didn't want to go to prison. So it was one of those things where I kind of stopped myself when I became 14. It took a lot of control to control that. But that's the funny thing is once that's in you, it's always in you. It's a fire in you, which is why I wanted to call this, Into the Fire, and why we kind of put a fire logo also.
On there.
Yeah.
But it's also about a rush. That's the reality. With chaos comes that dopamine hit. It becomes that rush,
Yeah.
and it's energizing in many ways. And people need that as well. And again, that often motivates, that often drives. And a lot of times we don't even realize that that's what's driving us. It's just we know that we've hit this high. It feels great, whatever that chaos happens to be. And then when you kind of have those lulls and there's almost a sense of boredom, or in some cases feel lost, or you're just looking for that next hit of chaos.
Yeah.
So be it.
But it's funny once you've learned to control it and it's in you. And I was talking to my mother about this. And she was saying, I say as a kid, you start to at some point learn to identify with one of your parents.
Yeah.
My mother's a calmer, the nicer one. Everyone thinks she's sweet. Everyone loved coming to my house, spend time with my mom. No one ever saw my dad. They might have caught a glimpse of him here or there after a baseball game when we ran into him. But uh, there's parts of him that I have in me which explains some of my behavior too, right? And it's one of those things that I've kind of learned, even though I, can be calm, I can be this, I can be patient. When pushed far enough, and she said this about me, I didn't say this about me. She's like, you don't mind burning it all down. She goes, if you get pushed far enough, your inclination is fuck this.
Yeah.
If you think you're gonna get away with that or get the better of me or that it's just something in me and it's a fire in me, it's like I'm burning it down. It's the same thing that allowed me to lose 90 pounds in a year, right? I was overweight. Give me a gym membership. People are like, you're not gonna be able to lose 90 pounds in a year. I'm like, watch me, right? People are like, I'm gonna be the #1 dad blogger in Canada, and they're like, "Pfft." I'm like, watch me. So that's part of the superpower too. So I like that we can bring our experiences, like look at you, right? Like most people would not, be able to walk away from the job that you had,
Yeah.
the position that you worked very hard for, uh, the money, and say, fuck this. I disagree with it fundamentally, so I just can't do it anymore. And, most people struggle with that and they'd like to do it, but they never take the step forward to do it, right? So you took it as a financial hit. There's so many aspects of things that you had to
But it
change.
took a long time coming because
Yeah.
I have a really good friend of mine.
Mm.
I'm going to shout out to Lauren right now, who I know will be listening to this or watching this. But we talked about this for a long period of time, and she would always say to me about the fact, hey, there's a lot more to things than the career, the finances, this and that. And don't get me wrong, when people ask me, I love teaching.
Mm.
And I loved making a difference for students. It was the politics that was off-putting. So
Yeah.
it had nothing to do, as I say, with the community itself. It was
But
the
do you see yourself
politics.
as a risk taker?
If you had asked me this 7, 8 years ago,
Mm.
no way in hell.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Nervous, anxious. I get that from my mom.
Yeah.
But at the same time, very independent and stubborn and fiery, which I get from my dad.
Mhm.
Okay, so in some ways, it's hey, if I disagree with something, I'm going to stand up for it, which seems like that's someone who's maybe a bit more of a risk taker. But at the same time, it's like, what if I do this? And what if the impact is this? Or what if the consequences are this? And so it was talk about like
Yeah.
cognitive dissonance, like
But
talking about really struggling. But when I finally made that jump 5 years ago, I think it gave me, it's like a whole new universe opened up. And I see myself now more definitely as a risk taker.
yeah,
And now it's, as I say, it's okay. Let's welcome some of that chaos. Let's
that's
bring some of
in,
that in.
in your mind. You like, but you didn't think you were a risk taker, but you were taking risks all the time, right? And it was explained to me today that there's three different kinds of risks that you can take. One's physical, one's financial, and one's emotional, right? Physical, most people want to avoid because they want to avoid pain.
Yeah.
Financial, they definitely want to avoid because you don't want to, go down in like 1929 and have to jump off a building if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
But the other one's emotional, and it's fine. Like I think you're good at all three. For me, though, it's the emotional one. And I don't know what it is, and maybe I'm impulsive or whatever it was. I'm controlling now better. But when it comes to emotional, and just because of the way I grew up, if you want to talk about chaos,
Yeah.
I am fully comfortable. Again, if I have to burn it all down and build it back up again. And it's so funny how many times someone has thrown something at me and it just you think like it would make most people crumble, right? And that's kind of like also why I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
But it also shows you like, yeah, you're a risk taker. Even starting a blog was a risk.
I was gonna say that was a huge risk, but even something as recently, I mean, we've been going to a number of network events lately,
Mm.
right? We've been going to meetups, we've been doing artwork,
Yeah.
artist networking events.
Just
We've been
going out and meeting new
going to-
people who are
meeting new
different.
people, just talking to random people.
Yeah. And how
Sharing
many
my
new
thoughts.
people have we met in like a couple months?
Holy shit! Like I've lost track. Like it's been a lot.
And how
But
many people would go do that without knowing anybody and just
no.
show up in there and that's what they would do?
And I take a look at talk about risk taking.
Yeah.
Even you, you did karaoke. Next thing you know, you're up there on stage. I wasn't there, but I heard about this
Yeah.
event, and you're up there on stage, and it's
Well, because I like to sing in like my own time, but I would never sing in front of my friends. I didn't want to get them ridiculed. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm 50 years old now. Like, why do I give a shit what other people think?
right.
Doesn't mean that night I was supposed to go to this random meetup where I didn't know anybody, and I thought it was going to be a total dud. I'll tell you that. I thought like I was going to show up and there'd be like 5 people there. I showed up and there were 40 people there. And at first I didn't want to go, but I forced myself to go. And even when I was there, I wanted to leave. I'm like, there's 40 people here. I have to sing in front of 40 people now.
Yeah.
By the end of the night, I sang 4 songs. I did a duet with someone who was more afraid than I was to sing a song.
Okay.
So I helped someone too. And then the guy who ran it liked the way I sang so much, he brought me up to do a duet for the final number of the night. And I'm laughing at the end of it going, okay, what happens if I didn't do that? Like, how would I feel about myself? I would have gone home defeated. Instead, I went there and I just had a great night.
But you talk about quotes, and quotes really are a huge thing for me as well. And one of my favorite quotes, I never get the wording exactly, but they talk about it was, I think it was a survey, or they had questioned a number of older adults, let's say in retirement homes, 80s and 90s later in life, and if there's advice you could give to the younger you or younger people out there, what is the one
Don't
piece of
listen
advice
to
you
other
give?
people.
Yeah, yeah, right. One of my favorites is don't regret the things you did,
Yeah.
but rather the things you didn't do.
Yeah.
Because if you do something, yeah, you can say, shit, like what was I thinking? And mistakes come in different forms and sizes and ways, right? But a lot of them, we make mistakes out to be bigger than they really are. We figure like
Don't take a chance
Yeah.
because you didn't want to take the risk. And also, again, because we didn't think we were risk takers.
absolutely.
And once we realized that we kind of are, there's so much more reward to that.
And you don't want to look back later on and be like, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I try it? Whether it's a business venture, whether it's taking a trip to some new locale that turns out to be phenomenal, whether it's going up to some random person who's caught your eye and who knows, that could be the person for
Yeah.
you, whether it's switching career. Like I can go on and on and on. But the whole thing is, again, if you're risk adverse
Mhm.
and chaos adverse,
Mhm.
I'm not saying people should do a 180 and switch over, but it's about not fearing it quite as much. Because one of those things, I don't know if you've read Phil Stutz or seen the documentary Stutzy.
No.
Okay, Jonas Hill's a psychiatrist.
Oh yeah, I did
Okay,
start to
you
watch
saw
that.
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And what he talks about is, and this kind of ties in with the chaos. When you think about fear,
Mhm.
right? And it's if you envision almost like this black cloud,
Yeah.
and what happens when you avoid it? Cloud becomes bigger and bigger and
I have a
bigger.
better one than I have that goes
Yeah.
along with it. It's not better, but I'll say it goes along with that.
Okay.
There's this guy named Tim Fletcher, and he does these podcasts on CPTSD.
Okay.
And he did one on fear. And he started going through all the different types of fear. And by the end of it, I was laughing. I'm going, with all these different types of fears, they
Yeah.
all cancel each other out. So what's the difference? Just do whatever the fuck
Before
you
you go
want to
on,
do.
though,
Yeah.
for people who aren't familiar with the acronym,
Yeah.
CP,
CPSD,
yeah,
complex,
it's
what's the C? What's the P part?
post-traumatic
Post-traumatic,
stress
yeah,
disorder.
stress,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was just remembering trauma. But it is, but you add the complex in there, and that's more like it's not just post-traumatic. It's the complex goes back to childhood,
yeah,
right? So this is kind of why we're here too, because it's like the whole reparenting thing we were talking about. If you can go back to that and you can kind of find, where the issue started for you, and you kind of were touching on it before, I was going to mention the word programming. We're programmed from the time we're kids. And depending on what your parent is, right? In my dad's case, my dad was a narcissist. It worked in his favor to retrain me in the way he wanted me to be to make his life easier, to accept bullshit that he was going to throw our way.
right.
Not to make me a better person or anything like that. And, there were certain fears he put in me. Like, even I was talking to my kid the other day. My kid was walking over one of those metal grates on the street. I'm like, when I was a kid, my dad would tell us not to walk over those because that was his fear. And that's not a narcissist thing. That's just a general fear that was passed on to him from his mother.
But it's projecting.
But it's like it's projected on you, but that's not my fear. That was your fear.
Exactly.
Right. And with my kid, it's like walk on it all you want. And I said the only thing you want to look for is make sure that concrete's not crumbling. And if it's not crumbling, you're good to go. Right. You weigh nothing. What are the odds you're gonna fall through
Yeah.
there? But it's that programming that is the hardest thing to go back. And in reparenting, you got to reprogram yourself because most of the time when people are ruminating and they're overthinking and doing all these things, the voices in their head isn't theirs. The voice in their head are other people who put information into their head, and those are fears that were put into your head by other people that, I remember feeling free when I was a kid. But the more I got that from a father, a stepmother, stepfather, even my mother to her own degree had her own fears that she was adding to it. Then you have, rules that you get in school and people make you fearful that way. Your friends make you fearful for certain things. You have to go back and say, okay, a lot of this isn't me. It's a lot of stuff that was put in there. How do I take it out? And how do I stop? How do I catch it when the
Yeah.
thoughts come in my head and stop it?
And what's so interesting, what people don't realize when you talk about, and you go back to children and everything else, right? A lot of times, common question children ask, why?
Yeah.
Right? Why? And that's where a lot of times,
Because I said
because I
so.
told you,
Yeah.
children aren't asking why to be defiant. They're
They
innately
want to understand.
curious. They want to and if you just take the time to explain, but instead, because I said so,
Yeah.
right? Or because of this, or because I'm the adult, and eventually get enough of that, it shuts down that free thinking, it shuts down that creativity, or worse, it creates fear. It creates fear.
It's fear, but there's another part to it too. And I remember a study that I read where, or it might have been, something on Facebook, but I think it was a study. It said that all kids are born geniuses. And by the time they are high school graduates, only 2% of kids are still geniuses. Why? It's because of what's put in their heads.
Absolutely.
They're talked out of trying things or trying to do new things. And it's like some of them may find their new groove when they're away from their parents or with new friends in a new situation, going to university or college or whatever, or you just even going to Europe and
Yep.
finding themselves. But some people find that opportunity earlier. Some people don't. Some people get bogged down in it, and it's a later point in life where they kind of reach like, I don't want to be this anymore. This isn't who I am. Right? I started in a different way. I can see it when you go back. There was a I think it was a documentary I was watching where they were showing people, and as they were going through things like depression and stuff like that, they showed where they were happy. And then they start to show the pictures of how they changed just in pictures and how their
Yeah,
faces were and things like that. And it's like they didn't do that to themselves. Life didn't necessarily do it. People did that to them.
absolutely.
So that's kind of one thing that I really want to cover in this is like everyone has a choice to change their life. You're never stuck where you are.
Mark Manson talks about, and I love this,
Mm.
pain's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're all going to experience pain. Suffering is optional.
Mark Manson, How Not to Give a Fuck.
How not to give a fuck,
Great book.
right? Great
Yeah.
book, great podcast. But that's the thing. It's that the suffering part is optional.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we choose to kind of take on that pain and you know, we let it kind of just we replay it over and over and we get ourselves into this cycle.
Yeah.
And it's again, it's okay. Yeah, sit with it, understand it, and then move forward
Part
with
of
it.
it's pain and it's the hardest part to get over. And I know certain people don't have this, psychopaths, sociopaths, cluster Bs. Um, but they don't have the toxic shame that some other people have. And I think the toxic shame is what stops a lot of people because they internalize it.
Yeah.
And it's not from them, it was put into them. And I think once they realize that and they go through all these podcasts and all these things, and it's like, look, I took 6 months to figure stuff like this out at one point. And you whittle it down to that toxic shame. If you can kind of figure out what that is, um, and it's the stories that you tell yourself, right? It's the way you look at the world for everything, and it's in your nervous system too, which is even worse.
Yep.
And your nervous system, what your cognitive brain only works 5% of the time. The rest, 95% of it is unconscious. You have to go in and figure that out, and it's your job to do that.
And it's interesting again. I know we're all over the
Yeah.
place with things right
But it
now,
all it all it all brings it
it
back
all
to
ties in.
topics we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, I'm reading another book right now called The Way Out, and it's actually about reprogramming neural pathways and neural pathway reprocessing,
Mhm.
and it talks more about dealing with chronic, you know,
Yeah.
pain. But they talk about even with the brain, 44 different parts of the brain when they did fMRI, so functional
Mhm.
MRIs,
Yeah.
okay, where they, you know, they map the
Yeah.
brain and, you know, lights up and everything else. 44 different parts of the brain lit up when you're looking at
Mhm.
certain pain receptors and
Yeah.
everything else. And it's about changing those neural pathways. And it's no different when you're dealing with the emotional well-being. And where that all ties in is the reality is most people,
Mhm.
I'd even go as far as saying all people, but again, I know you mentioned sociopaths
Yeah.
and so forth, but essentially everyone is fragile. We're all fragile
Mhm.
individuals being held together with whether it's glue, tape, staples, a wad of bubble gum,
Yeah.
whatever it is, trying to do the best we can. And that's where I think if people realize that, you know, they show a little bit of compassion for someone else or a
Yeah.
little bit, you know, you take a step back and why is that person being that way? Or, you know, why it's about taking a
Well,
step back and
for some of
understanding.
us, we're lucky enough to be self-aware and we'll catch ourselves, is
Yep.
the way I look at it, right? So you're talking about brain scans and things like that. If you look at sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, right? Other people, borderline personality disorder. From what I've read, a lot of those people, their brains were changed when they were younger.
Yeah.
And because their brains were changed, they see the world very differently than you and I do. And in a lot of cases, it's hard to reverse that. What happens to a lot of other people is they go through things in their lives where, they're on a roller coaster. So there's dopamine and cortisol going through their body. And that can really mess you up. And then sometimes that can change the way your brain is. The thing is, for those people, though, they can reverse that over time.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're here for, is to help those people, the people that, we can identify with, um, and do our best to just even have topics that they can discuss. So even if that's to go down the rabbit hole themselves and go research it themselves, and they might not have thought of it before, but we've done so much research that we might be able to help them.
Or talk to a trusted friend,
Mm.
talk to a partner, talk to a loved one about things. I
Therapist,
think,
yeah.
right? Yeah, definitely a
Yeah,
therapist. But, you
therapist.
know, communication, deep communication
Mhm.
is also lacking, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where if people can take this away and like, hey, you know, we listened to this podcast. You know, one of my favorite things was reading the five love languages.
Mhm.
And I know that someone who I worked with in terms of, you know, some of the work I've done on
Yeah.
me, and she had said one of the important things is to have those regular conversations,
Mhm.
right? Kind of take it a step further and bring up these things and have those deeper conversations. Doesn't mean that you don't already have them, but really kind of go into the minutia and dig a little bit deeper with things. Or as you say, something comes up from
But have those conversations, but that's a big part of it too. A lot of people don't know how to communicate properly
no.
because they never witnessed it when they were kids.
And part of communication is can you disagree respectfully, and why in some cases even disagreeing is actually a great thing. It doesn't mean that you're attacking someone. It doesn't mean it's a negative. It can actually push you to think a little bit differently, critically think, or even help you become self-aware. There's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
That's key, right? It's all about the approach, but I think it's
It's
key.
the approach and the way you see it. Are we here to solve something, or are you going to destroy me because you want to win? And I think that's the problem a lot of people have, and it's a hard thing to get over because
Absolutely.
you're triggered or your back is up or something like that. So, I mean, this is a lot of the kind of stuff that we're going to cover while we're doing this. So it should be really interesting for a lot of people watching us. Um, we can do some outlandish things at certain times too, but I figured
Absolutely.
this one we'd probably, even though I don't want to play it so straight all the time, I want to have fun with the topics that we have. But I think it's important that we get out all this information so people know who we are and where we come from.
Yeah.
And that really we're just looking to help other people by starting conversations and just from a different point of view.
Absolutely. We're going to put ourselves out here and
Yeah.
again, hopefully just get people to think about things differently, embrace the topics, think about everything in a certain way and run with it. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, what would be your favorite topic to talk about?
Oh, wow. Honestly, yeah, exactly. There are so many. What about you? Do you have one in particular?
I really like the one we have coming up in the next episode, which is talking about, people that are really hung up on their exes still.
Yeah.
I think it's an important conversation. I think a lot of people go into that the wrong way. And I really look forward to having that conversation to show them that maybe trying to get their ex back isn't the best thing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So we're going to see all of you next episode. Thanks for joining us today. This is Adam.
this is Al.
We're the Kings of Chaos,
We are.
and we look forward to you joining us for future sessions.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.